Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Thrive Innovation Series here in Silicon Valley. I'm John Hartnett, CEO and founder of SVG Ventures and Thrive, and we're an innovation and investment platform advancing the future of food and agriculture through innovation. And I am delighted this morning to be joined here today by an incredible panel of leaders and founders from AeroFarms, Impossible Foods, and Wells Fargo for a discussion on innovation and disruption in the food supply chain. Welcome, folks. Great to have you here. And next slide. If you want to join the conversation or tweet out about some interesting remarks of any of our panelists today, please do so. You can see our various different Twitter handles and info here. The next slide. We focused the innovation series on the future of the food supply chain from field to fork, as well as addressing some of the challenges feeding a growing population in a sustainable way, and also dealing with climate change and impact of on this global pandemic that we're dealing with today. We've been discussing key trends, technologies, solutions across the agri-food industry with top CEOs, leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors. And we have an excellent lineup today, obviously. And next week, we will have the leaders from Wilbur Ellis. They're a major agri-food company, 100 years in the making, and CEO John Buckley and Mike Wilbur from Cavala Ventures will join us. And then we will also have a webinar on November 19th with Driscollberry's CTO Scott Comar and Plenty's founder Nate Story to hear about the latest story going on there. So make sure you register there. Next slide, Jess. Our Thrive Accelerator was voted the #1 accelerator in the world last year at the World Agri-Food Summit by AgFunder. We have some incredible success stories from great entrepreneurs from around the world. And in the past 6 years, these companies have created almost $1 billion in value. Next slide, Jess. So this year, we are now launching our Thrive 7 program for early stage startups, and we would encourage entrepreneurs from around the world to apply. And next slide, Jess. This year, we're doing a Thrive Global Initiative. So as part of our innovation series, we have launched this challenge, and really to focus on some of the key issues. Obviously, ag tech and agri-food has a higher focus in terms of not just delivering more food, but also kind of helping from a sustainability perspective, and also addressing some of the challenges, both in terms of the SDG goals and also the USDA goals that we were part of announcing with Secretary Perdue earlier this year. We are specifically focusing on a couple of key geographies. We're delighted that we launched the Thrive Africa Challenge, the Thrive Australia Challenge, and the Thrive Canada Challenge. So all you Canadians and Australians and Africans, we really want you to apply and want to see the best entrepreneurs, from there. And next slide, Jess. Or maybe if you want to play the video and give you a little bit of a flavor of the challenges. Forward to these challenges. So maybe in the next slide, if you want to join us or learn more about our challenges, please contact us. Our website and details are here. I'd also like to thank our corporate partners. These are some of the biggest names in the industry, and we're delighted to be working with them to accelerate their innovation and growth strategy. And a special call out to Wells Fargo, who are joining us here today and have been a partner for ours for the last 4 years. So big call out to you there, and thank you. Maybe next slide, Jess. We've got, again, a great international audience. I think we've got people from almost 50 countries around the world and 41 states. So really broad audience today. And I think we had over 600 people already registered here this morning. And next slide, Jess. We will launch our poll right now. So we will have a few questions. And if you would like to start, giving us your answers to those, select one. There's 2 questions, one on sustainability and the other one on consumer. And if you just want to pick one of those, and we'll review those with the panelists later on. Next slide, Jess. If you want to submit questions, we have a great audience, and please interact with us. We'd love to get your questions. So, fire in the questions now. You can upvote these questions so that the best questions and your question gets answered as part of the review. And next slide. So I'm, again, super excited about today's panel. We've, an incredible leaders who are probably the most exciting, most disruptive and innovative companies in the food supply chain. I think obviously, as we know, we see the challenges that are there ahead of us, and there is no question that our planet needs sustainable solutions that will help us. And 2 of probably the most disruptive companies, both AeroFarms and Impossible Foods, are really delivering on that promise. And likewise, delighted to have Wells Fargo here. Delighted that Chris Nagg is here with us. Chris is the head of the food and beverage group at Wells Fargo. Chris is based in Chicago and oversees the national food and beverage team at Wells Fargo Commercial Banking. He has 24 years of experience in financial services, 13 of which have been in food and beverage space. And he and his team will work primarily with companies in the food and beverage and manufacturing and distribution. So his insights are going to be really, really interesting. I'm really looking forward to his COVID trends as well in terms of what's going on there. So I'll hand it over to Chris for a quick intro and framing up our panel and a little bit about Wells Fargo.
Thank you, John. And thanks everyone for joining, getting used to these Zoom meetings, and hopefully everyone's safe in the spot that they're in. My name's Chris Nagg. I lead a team. I help lead a team here at Wells Fargo within the commercial bank that covers, as John said, the food, beverage, manufacturing, and distribution space. We do at Wells Fargo have $52 billion committed to, as John alluded to, from the field to the fork. We have a very large agribusiness component of that. We have the middle tier, which is the food, beverage, manufacturing, distribution, and then we have a lot with the end consumer, where the retailers and restaurants are operating. So a great time to have a purview or a seat from that and just see what's happening from the field to the fork here. Some of the things that I would love to talk about here today is I'm seeing an amazing transformation over the last 10 years of just the curation that people are trying to do here in the US, not so much in some other countries, but the disposable income is there to innovate in the food process, and people are willing to spend their dollars. So places where there's higher disposable incomes, it's driving consumer behaviors, and manufacturers and distributors and the end companies that are delivering that food to our plates are trying to figure out all those things. With COVID, it's thrown a little bit of a monkey wrench into a lot of things, most specifically food away from home and at home. I think most of you may know on this call, but 2 years ago, food away from home eclipsed food at home for the first time, at least in the US. And that number is a little bit more in some of these other countries as well. So with the onset of COVID and the things that are happening, we have a lot of manufacturers and distributors reacting to those issues, and quite honestly, doing a lot of good things in the supply chain, doing things to make our food safer. And I think COVID, albeit that has thrown us a pretty big curveball, I think it's going to make us better in the future. And as we think about how we set up companies to deliver the amount of food that we need, as you saw in the video, by 2050. And so there's a ton of problem solvers out there. A lot of them are on this call, and look forward to the conversation around how we solve the supply chain issues that are out there to feed those 10 billion people in 2050, and how we lead up to that. So at Wells Fargo, we provide capital to do those things, and glad to be here, John, and look forward to this rich dialogue. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And Mark Oshima is co-founder and chief marketing officer at AeroFarms. Mark is an award-winning marketer with extensive background in retail, branding, and media. He is passionate about increasing access to healthy food, and he was recognized just a couple of years ago by the Eating Well magazine as one of the top American food heroes. They are also, AeroFarms are a Thrive Top 50 company for the last 3 years. So we've been tracking you guys for a number of years, and you've done an incredible job. I'll hand it over to Mark.
Thank you, John. Yeah, great to be here and great to be able to share our story. And what you highlighted in terms of the macro challenges have become even more acute, right? So we have increasing population growth, but we also are coupling that with obviously major challenges with our field growing. And so when we talk about AeroFarms and the work that we're trying to do, it's fundamentally, how do we think differently? And so we've been one of the pioneers and leaders for indoor vertical farming. And so when we think about how do we can change that equation in terms of how do we meet those facing challenges, we have to think differently in terms of our agriculture. And so we've been very passionate in thinking about how to really transform and enable local production and bring the farms to the communities, and really think about how do you bypass a very complex supply chain. But also you're helping mitigate, a lot of the things that we're seeing out in the field in terms of climate change, in terms of pests, in terms of issues. And what that has allowed us to do, though, is really uncover, though, an opportunity here that's no longer just about urban farming or indoor vertical farming. We've been able to apply our expertise to a wide category of different solutions and challenges. And so for us as a company today, we're over 170 people. What we've done in terms of taking a very different approach with our lens here is that we've brought all the expertise in-house. We've developed our own proprietary growing technology and thinking about how to create the perfect environment for the plants, how to optimize. And so we're able to grow plants that out in the field may take 30 to 45 days, we can grow in 10 to 12 days. So even a half or even a third of the time, while using 95% less water, while using no pesticides. So fundamentally rethinking about what we can do in terms of thinking about those inputs and managing that really carefully. If we go to our slides, there are a few things to be able to share. I don't have visibility from my end, so maybe in terms of, we're going to share a few things. So just in terms of, if we go to the next slide, Jessica, just wanted to be able to articulate, it's not only what we've been doing in terms of breakthrough technology, it's how we're doing it. And that's really one of the most important things. When we talk about being a mission-driven organization, our mission is how do we grow the best plants possible for the betterment of humanity. It's broad, it's ambitious, and it's areas that we think we can have a broad impact in terms of not only geographies, but types of food and types of categories. We've grown over 800 different types of products. And thinking about areas that we can have impact, it starts now all the way at the seeds and the genetics, and all the way through post-harvest, and how do we create a better approach. And this is so critical in thinking about, again, every decision we make about our growing systems and our approach. And so the Certified B Corporation is a big part of having that transparent scorecard and thinking differently how business can be a force for good. This is broader than just agriculture. And so how do we be a good actor? And so this has been a really important lens for us in terms of not only the what we're doing, but how we're doing it. The next slide just articulates a few. And as John, as you said, with Thrive, we've actually won that in the last 3 years and been recognized. So deeply appreciative of that. But also in terms of recognition from Fast Companies, one of the world's most innovative companies. Last year, Time recognized this as one of the best inventions in food. So not only is it technology and innovation in terms of sustainability, but it's recognition around how do we create a new category of food. And that's one of the things that's been really exciting in terms of getting feedback in terms of better flavor profiles, better nutrition, and the consumer's been really embracing that. How are we doing that? The next slide just kind of illustrates some of the things that, some of the tools that we're doing in terms of revolutionizing agriculture. So this is built into our system. We're constantly monitoring. We're doing things like machine vision, machine learning, AI, And it's allowing us to think about how to replicate this and how to scale it and ensure whether the farm is here in the US or whether it's in the UAE or whether it's in another region, our team can see real time what's happening. So the next slide just highlights a couple of things that we're doing in terms of our lens. Our global headquarters, we're in Newark, New Jersey, but we're very much international in focus. You can really see and think about different regions that we're thinking about having an impact. And wanted to highlight just a couple of key partnerships that we have in thinking about the kind of work we're doing. So we're growing and selling commercially our product into major retailers, major food service companies, but a big lens and a big arm of what the work we're doing is also proprietary research for Fortune 100 companies. And that opportunity is really exciting when we think about the impact we can have. The next slide just highlights one of the things we're doing here in the US with an organization called FAR, Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. We actually are in the final year of a 3-year program. It's a $2 million initiative specifically around our ability to identify stressors of leafy greens to optimize for taste and nutrition. And then we actually extended this work into a new thing called PIP, Precision Indoor Plants Consortium, where again, we're bringing together industry and helping advance. So it's no longer just about AeroFarms, but what we can do to help move agriculture further. Some things we announced, even though it was COVID-19 and the period, the next slide just highlights one of the programs we announced with the World Economic Forum and their Healthy Cities and Communities initiative, and partnering specifically, they identified 4 cities, Jersey City, Austin, Mumbai, and Moscow. We kicked off with Jersey City, which is right in our backyard. The idea of also we're going to be bringing our distributed farming right into the community. So our farming systems are very modular. These farms, we've had success already in inner city schools. These are going to show up in municipal buildings, senior assisted living. And so the idea of how do we think about food security and addressing these issues, we're bringing actually the farm actually into the community. The food that's grown will be provided to the community for free. So this is a really exciting program. And working with partners like with the World Economic Forum is fundamentally about how do we scale them. The next program, just wanted to highlight quickly, was the work we're doing in the UAE. So we made major announcements around building out what's going to be the world's largest indoor vertical farm just for R&D. And that really signals a lot of the work that we've been doing in terms of, again, that partnership work. So here we're working with Audio, the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, and building out this facility. And it'll be state of the art and having centers of excellence around organoleptic, around seeds, around genetics, around testing, around robotics, automation, and thinking about what's next in terms of what's needed from an agriculture standpoint. So we're excited to not only advance the work we're doing, but work closely and collaborate with key major Fortune 100 companies and helping them solve their ag supply chain needs. So just wanted to be able to share a little bit of an overview of some of the latest work we're doing and continuing to serve the community. We've maintained our farm operations even with COVID and taking that responsibility of nourishing the community really seriously.
That's fantastic, Mark, and thank you and congratulations. I mean, for the incredible progress that you guys have made. It's amazing to see how you're scaling and you're really changing the game in terms of, we won't be able to say field to fork. We will have to say farm, and the farm could be in the city, to our fork and to our table. So great job.
Thank you.
Rachel Conrad is Chief Communications Officer at Impossible Foods. Rachel is responsible for communication strategy, messaging, reputation, and content development, and product, corporate, and executive communications for Impossible Foods. She's a busy woman for sure. She's worked in startups and multinational environments, both in the US and internationally. She has reported directly to Elon Musk himself. And but at the moment, from what I hear, she loves her new job. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, John. This is great. And thank you guys for doing this. I think this is the most important panel that we'll all attend all week. I think you really did a great job curating this. Yeah, my name's Rachel and I'm Chief Communications Officer at Impossible Foods. I joined about 4 years ago, just as the company sort of came out of stealth mode. And it's definitely been the most interesting, most intellectual engaging, best job I've ever had. If you're interested, please apply. I wanted to really put that pitch out. We're actually hiring more than 100 scientists. And yeah, we might have room for some liberal arts majors like me too. I just wanted to go over the problem that Impossible Foods is trying to solve, and just talk a little bit about where we're headed. Okay, so Right now, animal agriculture occupies more than 45% of Earth's arable land, okay? People don't quite realize that. If you take every city, road, human habitation, it's about 2% of the land, okay? So the vast majority of humanity's footprint is actually taken up in livestock, and largely cows, by the way, but pigs, chickens, sheep, all forms of livestock. And that is land that cannot be used for other things, including photosynthesis, the world's best carbon capture technology, including biodiversity. And this is a huge problem. You guys all on this call probably know that the Amazon is burning, and these fires aren't due to lightning strikes or errant cigarette butts or something, right? We are intentionally burning the most biodiverse rich part of the world in order to make cow pastures and land for the crops that cows eat effectively. We're turning the Amazon rainforest into a dry savanna, grassland, and we're creating some pretty dangerous feedback loops that we can't really take away if we keep going through this series of one-way doors. So let me just give you a visual representation of what we're doing. Jessica, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so you guys know this is ancient history, right? You know, this is about 10,000 years ago. This representation is the actual biomass of humanity, that tiny little person. That's about how much of a biomass footprint people were back then, Homo sapiens. And the rest of wildlife, land vertebrates specifically, 300 million tons. Okay, so for the most part, 10,000 years ago, we were a minor species sharing the planet with, you know, wildebeests and elephants and everything else. Next slide. By 1979, we had actually shrunk down the wildlife biomass to a pretty extreme situation, right? It's pretty small. Humanity itself grew, and we can discuss whether, you know, zero population growth or other things are really the root cause of our current climate crisis. But in reality, and objectively, the most populous sort of biomass consuming species on our planet is now Bos taurus. That's the cow right there. And we are all dealing with the effects of this. As I mentioned, the strip mining of land specifically to make it, you know, cow friendly, the methane, the, you know, runoff of, you know, fecal lagoons and everything else. It's a pretty severe situation. This is 1979. Jessica, can you go to the next slide? Here we are. This is the last year's stats were available. We have shrunk biomass down to such a revolting, catastrophic perspective. We have lost about 2/3 of all biomass for wildlife on Earth in just my lifetime. Okay, I was born in 1970, and we've lost about 68% of wildlife biomass. That's stats from the World Wildlife Foundation. Humanity itself has grown, as you can see. You know, the earlier deck from SVG talked about 7.8 billion people. That's going to continue to grow. But look at the footprint, quite literally and also figuratively in terms of biomass, of cows. This is unsustainable. If you are a Martian looking at Earth, you would think cows ruled. We have prioritized Bos taurus and ourselves over every other species. And just to state the obvious, we all exist in a web of life, okay? And we don't need giraffes and elephants just because they're great to look at in, you know, African safari. It's because we all exist in this web of life, whether it's our reliance on sea kelp and the baleen whales, you know, reliance on algae and other things. We cannot continue to shrink down biomass at wildlife biomass at the horrific rate that we're doing, or else we will also extinguish Homo sapiens. Okay, that is a fact. Next slide. So what if we could reverse global warming by stopping this burning of land and you know, effectively minimizing the use of photosynthesis? And what if we could halt biodiversity collapse? Unfortunately, we can't get back any of the species we've already extinguished, but what if we could halt the total bloodbath that's happening, the decimation? Next slide. Well, we could actually do just that. And you know, there's a lot of your earlier question to the group posed this. There's a lot of things we could do. We could drive electric cars. We could use solar panels. We could avoid plastic. We could stop indulging in fast fashion and, you know, cheap plastic junk, you know, baubles and things like that. But frankly, the most important thing that any of us on this call and in the world could do to reduce our personal carbon footprint is actually to eliminate or reduce your consumption of animal-derived products, particularly meat and particularly beef cattle. So that is precisely the problem that our CEO and founder, Pat Brown, aimed to solve 10 years ago when he started really thinking in depth about this. And it turns out he could have, you know, like my other bosses, created an electric vehicle company pushing for zero emission transport. He could have done some clean coal carbon capture technology. He could have done some $1 trillion geoengineering project, okay? He could have also done what my previous boss, Elon Musk, is doing, which is he is so concerned about the plight of Homo sapiens that he is literally preparing a Martian colony. Okay, that's how big this problem is. But Pat said, you know what? We actually don't need to do this. I personally have no desire to live on Mars. All we actually really need to do, the biggest moonshot we can have, is not on the moon or Mars, it's right here. It's cleaning up our own planet. It is eliminating the need for 45% of our Earth's land to be used for essentially cow pastures and their crops, and making it available for biodiversity and photosynthesis. So the way to do that, though, is that you need to have a way to make meat that is delicious, you know, sustainable, nutritious, affordable, versatile. People are not willing to make a single compromise for the environment. Let's be very clear about that. Just like, you know, you don't buy a Tesla just because it's zero emission transport. You buy it because it's safe. It's an awesome car to drive. It's got a great user interface. Same thing with us. We need to make a, you know, beef that is completely sustainable, that's also delicious, nutritious, affordable, versatile, plugs into all of the things that you love about meatballs and burgers and lasagna and everything else. And we've done that. You know, the proof of concept is in the Impossible Burger itself, which is available at, you know, 11,000 grocery stores in the United States. It's also available in Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore, Macau. 9 in 10 people who buy our products are actually omnivores. This is a really important point. We are not a veggie burger company. We are not providing an alternative for vegans and vegetarians. Frankly, vegans and vegetarians are already doing the right thing by way of humanity. We don't market to them whatsoever. We only care about the true meat lover, right? The hardcore carnivore, or actually they're an omnivore, but I hope. But we really want to cater to them, because it does not matter at all if a vegetarian or a vegan eats our product. We have to convert the people who need help in reducing their own carbon footprint, and specifically by providing them a product that offers no compromise to what they love about beef. So, you know, it turns out, we just did a study last month, about 72 cents on every dollar that people spend on the Impossible Burger is coming at the direct expense of animal-based products. So that's great. We are going to take that all the way to 100%. And let me show you, in addition to, next slide. This is one of the amazing things about the Impossible Burger. So no compromise on taste. Obviously, that's why omnivores eat it. But it uses 96% less land, 87% less water, and emits 89% fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So that's pretty incredible. Next slide. Also, obviously no animal-derived products whatsoever in the Impossible Burger. So there's zero cholesterol, zero trans fats, zero animal hormones, zero antibiotics, and I just added this for John because I knew we'd be talking about COVID. 0% chance of contributing to the next zoonotic pandemic. I think everyone on this panel understands that, you know, pretty much the majority of pandemics and epidemics in the world, and I'm talking HIV, AIDS, Ebola, SARS, MERS, you know, avian flu, et cetera, are the result of our very perverse relationship with animals. We need to end that for the sake of public health and individual health, frankly. Next slide. Honestly, this is an amazing company. No one's ever tried to think this big about disrupting the food sector, right? If impossible is successful, and I know it will be, we will literally make a difference that you can see from space. Because instead of seeing the Amazon burning, and instead of seeing the Amazon and, you know, Indonesian rainforests and other things turning into dry grasslands, we're actually going to restore biodiversity on the best planet in the world, and we're not going to have to go to Mars, and we can actually turn this around, and we can do it pretty quickly. Thanks.
Excellent, Rachel. Thank you for that. You're obviously super passionate about this. I can see for sure. And I mean, it's incredible and an honor to have each of you on the call here. I mean, talking about something that's the most important thing in our lives, our family, the planet, biodiversity. I mean, this is as good as it gets here in terms of the conversation. And you know, with that, you know, maybe, you know, kind of just the first question really is around kind of innovation and disruption in the agri-food space. I mean, you're really seeing major trends in terms of the next generation foods, next generation farming, and obviously both of you are here today leading the way, you know, on that. What are the new challenges that we're going to be facing, and why must these be met with new solutions rather than doing the same thing? Hey, maybe Mark, if you want to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of build on some of the things that Rachel was highlighting in terms of, you know, what we're seeing in terms of agriculture. On the production side, major issues in terms of the field grown product. We're thinking about loss of arable land. We're thinking about loss of macro and micronutrients. We think about issues now with food safety. These are putting much bigger spotlight on how do we help mitigate that? What can we do to overcome that? And actually, one of the best things is a carbon sink is actually Mother Earth itself. And so when we think about not tilling and not having to disrupt the soil, we're having to think very differently. And actually, you know, I love the space analogies and sort of space image when you can actually see in the spring, you can see in terms of exactly when they're starting to do their planting and in terms of the carbon impact. And so we need to think very fundamentally, very differently in terms of like, how do we manage that process? And so for us, what we're seeing though is this opportunity which was originally about supply chain disruption, enabling this local production. What we realized though, fundamentally is like, we can create a better product through this control, through this precision. So the idea that we can actually increase the nutrients, we can actually increase the flavor profiles, we can actually resurrect heirloom varieties that have disappeared. And thinking about, again, the traditional field farmers thinking first, is it maybe mildew resistant, is it drought resistant, can withstand a very complex supply chain? Flavor has become not even tertiary, it's like way on the bottom of that list. We can bring it back to the forefront. We want to talk about how do we change behavior in lifestyle health and wellness. You get them to eat more of it, well, you make it taste good. And so I love the focus that Impossible's had on taste. That's exactly what we're doing in terms of celebrating that. Our high bars, like no dressing is needed. So our level of control and precision is allowing us to create a new category of food here.
Thanks, Mark. Rachel, quick, comment on that.
No, I mean, I think that Mark said it exactly. I love no dressing needed, by the way, Mark. I think that's brilliant. I think that's actually, just to build on what Mark said, that's really important. I think we have seen over and over that there is pretty much, zero or very limited willingness on consumers to accept any compromise to what they value about a product purely for sustainability reasons. So whether it's taste, nutrition, versatility, cost, they really aren't willing to do much of anything in general for sustainability. Yeah, there's a few few people who do it. I mean, I'm obviously a complete freak in that I drive an electric car powered by solar panels. I don't buy fast fashion, and I don't eat animal derived products, but there's like one person like that other than me, right? And we've already sold it to our product to them. So what we really need to do to make this a mainstream mass market movement is to, frankly, ensure that there isn't a lot of demands put on the consumer. Like they're just really not willing to pay more, to settle for anything that they perceive as less valuable, lower taste, lower nutritional value than what they're getting now from ground beef from cows in our case. And that's a really high bar. And so, but once you nail the product, then you're actually not asking consumers to do much of anything. It's like, yeah, instead of buying this, just buy this. It's right next to it in the shelf. Just buy that. That's really the key. I think it's making the product and the process completely easy, transparent, but also just seamless for consumers to navigate.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And I know we're going to be going quickly to our Q&A from the audience as well, but I just wanted to cover a few different areas. Chris, I mean, obviously Wells Fargo, largest capital provider across the whole supply chain here. I mean, you're obviously seeing where investment is flowing, key trends, and what the consumer trends are, what the sustainability trends are. What's your view, or where are you seeing kind of all the action happening today? You're on mute, Mark. Or Chris.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it's right. It's right there with these two companies kind of in the market right here that you're having this conversation. The consumers are out there voting with their dollars, and they're voting with their dollars. It first has to taste good. I can tell you one thing. That's one thing that Nielsen and all of the folks, they're just not going to buy something that tastes good. But if they can make themselves feel better about the functional use of food, that's what the big CPG companies are trying to figure out. Big CPG has set up supply chains that don't necessarily work for some of those pieces. They're working through that, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of investment in the supply chains around solving problems. And whether it's COVID related, or whether it's consumers' taste are shifting and across the globe, and so these food companies are having to become more global. And the innovation is happening down below. And so as this big CPG companies are finding it, there's not a ton of Impossible Foods or a ton of companies that are able to pull off the capital needs, what they're doing. But there's a ton of innovation around that better for you product. And so the consumer is voting with their dollar. If sustainability is a component of that and high on the consumer's list, they're voting with that dollar as well. And you can kind of see from your one slide you shared with this audience on the call, John, look at the capital providers that are putting money into this space. They know there's a lot of problems. We're going to have a lot of problems to solve and solutions to come up with. And it's fantastic. It's quite honestly, I think we're at the very beginning stages of kind of the pioneers working through something that's a very old process. And so it's very exciting to see the dollars flow. But I think it starts with the consumer and what the consumer wants. And sometimes when you really get innovative, like the two folks you have on the phone here with Mark and Rachel, you get innovation by creating a product that some people didn't even know they needed. And that's what's pretty exciting to see some of the folks. And it's hard to win on those. It's hard to win and find those. But there's a lot of companies working on that. There's a lot of capital going towards it. And we're solving a lot of problems around soil, water, all the things that can help our environment and move the world, past the next 100 years. So. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, obviously, with two leaders here today, it's very exciting. It's like the start of a revolution. It's the start of like the internet, back in the 90s. It's something that's so exciting to see how it's going to play out. Maybe Chris, just a question for you in terms of obviously the whole COVID pandemic. It's hit every family. We're all here in our homes. I think we've got a heightened awareness in terms of the food supply chain and the importance of that. And obviously, certain trends have been accelerated, and also we're kind of seeing new trends. And I know Wells Fargo did a really interesting analysis with Nielsen a number of weeks ago, just kind of seeing some of the early trends that you're seeing there. I'd love you to kind of share that. And I'm specifically interested in the beverage industry and what trends you're kind of seeing there as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting as you've seen the supply chains going from away from home to at home across the globe. You've seen some constraints, whether or not there's a shortage of cans or a shortage of CO2, which makes the fizzy part of what we drink in beverages across the spectrum, the individual spectrum that they might order. So it's interesting. So food manufacturing and distribution. Some companies were well prepared, or I guess they didn't think about the pandemic as coming, and so they were well prepared because of just the way they can socially distance and follow some of the general guidelines. But many of the food companies, food manufacturers, and beverage manufacturers have lines set up where there's close quarters, and in March and April, that failed. It blew off some circuit breakers, and it really had this massive shift from SKUs that would go into food service or SKUs that would go into retail. And some folks were predominantly leaning on the food service side, and they struggled with a lot of things there. And the manufacturing with COVID, it just has the silver lining with COVID. It's making us think of a lot of problems. And I learned a new word today, zoonotic, pandemic. And so looking forward to preventing that in the future with some of these supply chains. And so as people make more investments in the food manufacturing and beverage manufacturing processes, they're going to be thinking about these things. And that's the silver lining, is that there's going to be reimagining is the big buzzword of the day, reimagining the workflow of how we get something in and how we can be more automatic or have more automation and things with a sustainable look. So COVID has definitely impacted a lot. It's added cost to the bottom line. But I think some of those costs will definitely stay. And whether it's air filtration systems in the plants, or whether it's the PPE and all those things, I think there's some good things that came out of it, and they're trying to figure out how to find their sea legs on some of that and make it more normal, so it doesn't happen again. Because
Thanks, Chris.
In March.
Thanks, Chris. Mark, I mean, obviously you've been busy. I saw your presentation there. I mean, you haven't been sitting still. I mean, what have you seen, the impact for COVID on vertical farming and your business, and how do you think that's going to impact the future?
Yeah, we were actually well positioned because we have a lot of safety procedures already in place. Access to the farm is quite limited, and there's a very elaborate SOPs around the PPE and washing up. And so, you really almost think about like entering a clean room. And so we do have very elaborate HVAC that actually and is at a high enough filtration level that is blocking and would be blocking any of the coronavirus. And so, we've had to work on things like shift staggering and thinking about when we take breaks, but, we were and have been able to maintain the farm operations. And you can see from the image, I mean, we're using automation. So the plants are being looked at 24/7, being censored and monitored. And so it's allowing us to be able to ensure that quality and then balance it with, again, how much we need to do from a manpower. So we think that this is really the next wave. And this issue on food safety, though, is absolutely critical. It's one of the reasons why we helped form what's called the CEA Food Safety Coalition. I've been on the FDA Romaine Advisory Task Force for the last 2 years and thinking about the issues that we see on food safety, food recalls. These are getting more and more acute, having to do very much with agriculture practices. And so the idea is, again, we need to have a new standard here. And the consumer at the end of the day is going to be saying, why isn't all my food prepared with this kind of preparation, this kind of safety, this kind of care? And I think, we're showing how this can be done. The purpose of this coalition that we put together is to actually share best practices and a new certification that will give the reassurance both to trade industry, but more importantly to the consumer.
And maybe before I go to the audience questions, Rachel, I'll kind of give you a double-barreled question. One on the kind of the COVID impact. I'm sure it has been significant for you, and then also in terms of the consumer, moving forward, in terms of what do you see what's scale going to look like 3 years, 5 years, compared to the existing livestock industry that you just talked about. Where do you see scale or that inflection point for Impossible?
So let me talk about COVID first, because I think this is actually a pretty interesting, highly topical thing, right? I think that just to be blunt, the animal agriculture sector has taken enormous pains to create walls and opacity around its industry, around how its products are made. We literally, as Americans in particular, do not want to look into the proverbial sausage factory, right? Very few times in the course of history have we actually been able to look into it. We're revolted, right? Obviously, this started happening in like 1906 with Upton Sinclair's publication of The Jungle, just disgusting, horrific kind of situations in slaughterhouses in Chicago at that time. Now, flash forward more than 100 years, due to COVID, we actually got that look into the sausage factory this summer. COVID became rife in places like Greeley, Colorado, and other big slaughterhouse places, to such an extent that America faced its first meat shortages since World War II, okay? And at exactly the moment when we were starting to realize, wow, this is unsustainable, because remember, COVID itself was a result of our, livestock, like I said, perverse relationship with livestock and all animals. Impossible Foods started expanding very rapidly. In March of this year, Impossible Foods' key product, the Impossible Burger, was in 150 grocery stores. And I don't mean 150,000, I mean 150, okay? Southern California and the Eastern Seaboard. And we had so much demand from our corporate customers, including Trader Joe's, Walmart, Target, Smith's, Safeway, Kroger, you name it. We did a massive scale up this summer. And as of today, we are in more than 11,000 grocery stores. Okay, so literally 150 to 11,000 in the duration of COVID, okay? And this is happening, as Chris mentioned, just as Americans are shifting from restaurant service, which we had been in for a long time, and we were in 20,000, restaurants, to at-home dining. And so just as Americans were facing their first meat shortages, seeing Nightline reports on the horrors of COVID hotspots in US slaughterhouses, suddenly there's this new product on shelves that looks and tastes like ground beef from cows, but doesn't contribute to these zoonotic pandemics, is available, has a very robust supply chain, and try it. It's also got these incredible health and sustainability benefits. So actually, we've seen just stupendous growth this year, and you can't help but credit the shift that Americans are starting to feel, and the outrage that they're starting to feel of our current animal agriculture-based food system.
Yeah. Awesome. Americans and international, everybody around the world, right?
Yeah.
Hey, just let's go to the poll questions, because I know we're kind of running a little bit tight on time, and maybe the polls, and see what people said. I have a feeling Rachel has kind of influenced the audience here. So the first poll was, as an individual, what do you believe is the most impactful action that you could take to reduce the carbon footprint? And no surprise, number one is change your diet. So I think we all need to go out and eat Impossible Burgers by the sounds of it. And closely followed by, drive an electric car and reduce your water usage. So obviously, Mark is helping out significantly there on the reducing the water. And then the next question, what do you think should be the priority focus area when it comes to agriculture and sustainability? And the first top question answered there is food distribution and waste. So taking waste out of the food supply chain. And again, that's followed by renewable energy, water resources. On those polls, those questions, Mark, any surprises there for you, or what do you think about those?
It's good to put the spotlight, I mean, particularly in the first one, in terms of the water usage. I mean, there's probably an underappreciation, 20% of California's electric bill is just moving water around, right? And who pays for that? The taxpayer. these externalities aren't factored into the true cost of doing business or into the food or into the impact. And so getting more awareness about these issues will help, I think, drive for a better approach here.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or observations?
You know, what I would say is I think the sustainability is real in whether it's the largest, some of the largest quick service restaurants in this country.
Mm-hmm.
You take the top 20, they all have a sustainability leader, and things that Mark are doing and thing that Rachel's company's doing are really driving their how they change the distribution of this. And so it's a fantastic look at what the consumer wants, and also it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Growing food closer to where it's eaten is a very important thing for a lot of people.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. And I also think that, I mean, there's been a lot of hand waving around sustainability over the years, and it feels like there is some significant momentum, you know, here that, you know, both from a consumer perspective and from a business perspective. Any other thoughts on your side, Rachel? You're obviously kind of voting for the change our diets.
Yeah, exactly. So just to piggyback on what Chris said, you know, a lot of people tend to ask Impossible Foods. I've seen a couple of questions in the audience too about this. You know, how do you, as such a, you know, radical company that's trying to eliminate the need for animal agriculture, how do you partner with companies like Starbucks and Burger King, which, you know, in many real ways, their entire business model is built on livestock, right? You'd actually be quite surprised. To Chris's point, these are companies that frankly are not just doing this because they see consumer shifts, especially with younger people really caring about that connection between climate and cuisine. They are also doing this for business continuity, business preservation, okay? I can guarantee you that boardrooms of, you know, big restaurant and hospitality organizations, all of the major grocery retailers at the board level are talking about, oh my God, we see that our current way of producing meat is not sustainable. What do we do? Do we want to wait and go into this kicking and screaming in some kind of cataclysm? Or do we want to integrate it in this sort of impossible Pat Brown vision that is very smooth, that is very, frankly, you know, transparent and easy for the consumer? And do we want to get the first mover, early adopter advantage and the sort of brand integrity and brand halo from doing this? So you would actually be pretty impressed with the sophistication that our customers, our corporate customers, take when they come when they start thinking about this. And again, this is at the board level.
Yeah.
Everyone is talking about this issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel, and a good issue to be talking about for sure. Just for our audience, I want to get to a couple of the questions there. Rachel, Robert Salmon, with AeroFarms having such a massive operation, how far do you end up shipping your product?
Yeah, so there's a real excitement around local, and that really is trumping even organic. It's trumping other factors, what the consumer's looking for. It's about a connection with the product, where it's grown. We typically see things that are within what we're calling even hyperlocal, within 75 miles. But for us, the thing that's been the most eye-opening is that we have national retailers coming in saying a product you're growing in Newark, New Jersey, we want to bring it back to California because of the excitement around the quality of the product. And like, this is what we do today in terms of being able to provide the consumer with choices. But our whole thesis has been about enabling that local production. It's really within the 75 miles is a core, you know, kind of core footprint for that.
Yeah, yeah. And Marco Merola, EU Parliament recently blocked a proposal to ban the terms burger from veggie products. Hang on, it's moving around here. Were you worried by this proposal, and do you think it's a good sign to see in Europe? I guess that's for Rachel.
Yeah, so great question, Marco. First of all, Marco also asked, how do I work for Impossible Foods? Visit allsciencenobull.com. That's our page to recruit scientists. And you can also check on our webpage, by the way, just for the liberal arts jobs. It's at the bottom of impossiblefoods.com. So on the labeling laws, by the way, I presume Marco's in Europe. There's a lot of states, I mean, more than 20 states that have similar bills that are sort of winding their way through state legislatures and capitol buildings. You know, frankly, this is all complete joke from our perspective. These labeling laws, this idea that you got to call it a a veggie puck or whatever is a joke. I mean, this is frankly the most brazen attempt at competitive hindrance from an animal agriculture industry that clearly understands correctly that it is being served up an existential threat. Okay,
Yeah.
so they've got no ability to compete on sustainability or business continuity or robustness. We have shown that they are not competing effectively on taste or nutrition. As our price goes down, it is truly an existential threat to them. And so what do you do if you're a vile, filthy incumbent smokestack industry? You turn to the lobbyists, right?
Yeah.
And you turn to these competitive hindrance kind of bills. It's a joke.
Yeah. Last question. It looks like it's for Chris, and always an important question for a man in the banking world. Chris, with the investments Wells Fargo makes, do they tend to be in companies that are more established, or are you making early stage investments as well?
Yeah, no, great question. Absolutely, we have a group that's led that works with Thrive. Rami helps lead those efforts for Wells Fargo. But generally speaking, the predominant piece of our business is in well-established companies, companies that have the equity backing behind them, and we're just doing the banking type services. But what we like to know is what is coming down the pike. So we have some early stage money that does get invested on some of the things that are going on. And so, but of the 52 billion, most of that is in companies they're well established in the supply chains and up and comers that are well capitalized. Okay,
great. Excellent. Thanks, Chris. And there was one other question I saw earlier. People asked, is our challenge only open to those specific countries I mentioned? No, it's open worldwide to all companies or all countries. So any entrepreneur in any part of the planet, you can be part of Thrive. So we just happen to kind of focus on a couple of countries because we want to go deeper in those countries. So I want to sincerely thank our panelists, Rachel, Chris, Mark. Phenomenal job, really interesting. I know we could stay here for another hour. Lots to talk about, but really appreciate your time, and big thank you for all your comments and contributions.
Thank you,
John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Everyone.
This is great.
So just to close off on our webinar, I'd like to thank our audience for your Q&A. We will follow up with some of those answers if you'd like to hear those. I'm sure our panelists will be happy to chat and give you some more information. Next week we have an excellent panel discussion and fireside chat with Wilbur Ellis. Wilbur Ellis is a renowned world leader in the ag area. Started 100 years ago, and pretty incredible to see a company not just survive but thrive through 100 years and really kind of change their business, and exciting to kind of see what they're going to be talking about going forward. So make sure you tune in for that. And then finally, I would like to thank everybody in the panel. I'd like to thank our team, Jess and Helen, and all our team that helped us. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for tuning in. Really looking forward to next week. And again, thank you to our panelists. And let's eat more healthily, I think is the message here. Help the planet, reduce our footprint. And I think these two companies are well on the way. Thank you, folks, and enjoy the rest of your day.